She refused once, and the court applauded 100 polite lies. Princess Elara was the light of Alderum, and yet she lived like a secret, wrapped in brocade and silence. Her gowns shimmered under chandeliers, her laugh echoed in corridors, and still there was a whisper that followed her from the market to the throne room. She had never given a single heart to anyone. Sons of barons came with banners. Captains arrived with swords that caught the sun. Traders offered jewels that smelled faintly of sea salt and old ledgers. None stayed. The king proclaimed reason after reason. The council proffered matchings and dowries, and the court watched as suitors paraded and failed. They came with pomp and left with smaller steps. Old sage Raffi said it felt like a prophecy in reverse, as if some ledger of fate kept closing on their offers. The king, tired of the procession and of the gossip that gnawed at the palace tapestries, publicly proclaimed half the kingdom to the one who could win Elara. The market filled. The plaza hummed like bees pressed to glass. Jorn the merchant, Captain Luis, Lady Anna, Guard Tomas, and Councillor Havel each took their turn, and each left the way smoke leaves a candle when a draft passes, thin and certain of nothing. The crowd, including Maya the cupbearer and 1,000 small voices like Rana and Corin, leaned forward to watch humiliation and hope meet under the same roof. Then, on a dusk that smelled of wood smoke and saffron, a figure crossed the threshold who did not fit any pattern they had rehearsed. He wore a coat the color of riverstone and moved as if the palace were only another room in a longhouse. He did not bear a shield, nor did he make a bow like the others. He had hair like winter straw, and a name that carried no titles. Rowan, he said when the king demanded his lineage. Rowan, a prince of a small place no map would remember, not loud, not gaudy, and his silence cut the hall like a slow blade. No one could say why his arrival felt different. What happened that night would change the way the court breathed. Prepare for a tale of a throne, a test, and a price that tasted like iron and honey. Everything began when the king, in a mood of equal parts fatigue and theatricality, set the terms and waited. The next days were show and ritual. The suitors lined up as if they read from the same script. Captain Luis beat his chest and spoke of battles. Jorn opened a trunk and the smell of pepper and foreign wood spilled into the hall. Lady Anna laughed and offered poems that tasted of orange blossom. Guard Tomas challenged with the thud of boots on marble. Councillor Havel argued merits like an accountant counting bodies. The crowd clucked with a dozen small judgments. "He will fail," said Maya the cupbearer aloud. And someone in the gallery, Corin, hissed, "He will fall," like a dare. The suitors tried force, tried sorrow, tried gold. They tried secrets of state and old songs that had once softened a king. Each attempt was a small story, a promise declared at noon, a jacket brushed against Elara's sleeve, an oath taken over spilled wine. Each attempt ended with a soft retraction and a small face of the princess that never gave away the reason. Sights multiplied. Velvet torn slightly where a suitor fumbled, a ring glinting, sweating palms, a chorus of murmurs that rose and fell like the tide. Sounds were sharp. Applause turned to awkward clapping, the scrape of stools as men retreated. Smells lived there too. Wax from candles, the faint musk of horses that had come from far estates, the scent of stew from kitchens below. Touch mattered in these small failures. A hand that lingered too long, a whisper that brushed a cheek, a glove that left a scent. The people began to tell stories about Elara, not as a woman, but as the story itself. Amid this, the CTA rested like a breath. You saw how even with all the luxuries, she was alone. If you were in the square watching, what would you think? Would you say she was cursed or simply lonely? Write in the comments, cursed or lonely, and tell a moment you saw someone wrapped in a life that did not fit them. The best replies will be featured and may shape our next tale. Your voice helps build the chorus of the court and the quiet that followed. Now return with me to the night when Rowan stepped forward and did something no other man had tried. When first he approached Elara, there was a hush that tasted like metal. In the inner chamber where the tapestries swallowed sound, he bowed only slightly. 8 candles threw their flame across his face, and the air smelled of rosemary and old books. Their conversation began as a barter of protocol, and then became something sharper. "You do not sound like a prince," said Elara, voice steady, eyes cool as cut glass. "I am not like other princes," Rowan answered, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "Why are you here then?" she asked, and her fingers fidgeted with a tassel. "Because I was told half a kingdom could be bought," he replied, with a small, crooked smile that tasted faintly of the sour wine he had been given in the servants' corridor. "You do not buy hearts with coin," she said, and her laugh was short. "No," said Rowan, "but I thought perhaps they could be opened with truth." "And what truth do you carry?" Elara asked. He closed his eyes as if catching a scent. "The truth that I once lost my home to a fire, and learned how a person becomes only what others demand," he said. "You are not asking me to be more." "Then I am," she said, a warning. "I am asking you to remember what you are," he replied. "What if I prefer to be forgotten?" she murmured. "Then you will be less remembered," he said. "Is that a threat?" she asked, teasing steel. "It is a promise," he breathed. The dialogue curled and folded, and then they both paused, like 2 hands that do not know whether to touch. In that small space, the chamber painted itself in sight and sound. The whisper of silk, the faint hiss of a window on its frame, the distant clatter of a cart in the lane, the taste of rosemary and stale wine, the warmth of candlelight on skin. The exchanges numbered 6, then 8 as they circled meaning, each line revealing more of them and more of the cost to come. When Rowan left that night, the court thought it had seen a simple private talk. It had seen instead the first small unfastening of a seam. The night came that mattered. The chamber was closed. The air smelled of lavender and old wood. A bowl of pears sat near a desk and tasted like sun from another year. They spoke, and then they stopped, and then they spoke again. "Why risk this?" asked Elara, fingers tracing the grain of the table. "Because I have no other hope," said Rowan. "But you are a prince," she said. "Unlikely, perhaps, in the court's eyes," he returned. "Do you know what is expected of me?" she said, and the candlelight made tiny stars on her skin. "I know what is expected of everyone who comes to a hall and wears a promise," he said. "Will you leave if I win you?" he asked later. "I will leave if I must," she said, a trace of fear. "Will you give me your name to hold?" he whispered. "I have given my name already to my father and to the throne," she said. "Do you love me?" he asked, and it landed like a small stone. "I do not know that I am permitted to love," she replied. "Are you asking permission?" he said. "Sometimes permission is the only mirror we have," she whispered. "Then look at me," he said. "See the part of me that is not a title." The exchange returned to them again in different forms, 6, 7, 8 times, each answer shifting like a tide. Tactile detail grew urgent. The scratch of fabric when a knee moved, the warmth of breath near the ear, the sour tang of shared wine on a tongue, the coolness of a hand that lowered to steady a wrist. The night expanded until it broke. When dawn came, a small thing had changed, and something else had been set loose. The price was not yet named. At morning, the court gathered to see the claiming. The king rose, and his voice was the sound of a building settling. "Whoever has won our daughter," he pronounced, "shall claim what I gave." Rowan stepped forward and did something no one expected. He declared that he did not want the half of the kingdom. He asked instead for a single promise: the right to keep Elara free to choose, and the palace to open its doors once a year to any who needed sanctuary from pride. The hall gasped. Jorn the merchant spat silk dust from his sleeve. Counselor Havel scowled at protocols. Captain Lewis ground his teeth. Lady Anna covered a small smile that tasted like pity. The king reddened, and then did something older than law. He asked Rowan how he would pay this price. Rowan smiled, the small crooked smile. "I will pay with the one thing no one offers willingly," he said. "I will give up the name of prince. I will disappear from pages and proclamations, so Elara can be more than a title in a ledger." Quiet fell like snow. Maya the cupbearer took a breath. Guard Tomas corrected his posture. Old sage Raffi whispered a phrase of an old prophecy that matched a footnote the scribes had kept hidden. "You would rather vanish than keep the crown?" Elara said. "I would rather be true than famous," he replied. In the end, it was the king who laughed, a small cracked sound, and then reached out and placed his hand on Elara. The court did not know whether to cheer. Some did, some did not. The aftermath arrived in small daily measures. The plaza that once hummed with court gossip learned a new refrain. People who had mocked now wondered which stories they would tell their children. Jorn retold the tale as a lesson in humility to customers who came for spices. Captain Lewis rode his route more slowly and thought of how he had judged at first glance. Lady Anna wrote a poem and then quietly burned it. Guard Tomas kept a small distance from the princess, as if proximity meant complicity. Maya the cupbearer brought Elara a different tea that smelled of lemon and soot. The king continued to wear the crown, but sometimes his hand lingered on an empty sleeve where a prince might have stood. Elara moved through the halls differently. The silence she had kept began to open like a shutter. Yet grief had a shape. It was not for a lost object, but for the life she had not led. The palace breathed in mourning and out memory. She learned that choices can be both a gain and a wound. 1 month later, she walked the market and overheard Corin and Rana trade the story as if it were a new currency. 3 months later, old sage Raffi visited the chapel and told her the line from the prophecy that matched Rowan's choice. And she listened, hands clasped, smelling the incense that felt like distant rain. 6 months later, the palace hosted a small shelter, as Rowan had asked, and Maya, Jorn, Captain Lewis, Lady Anna, and Guard Tomas came to help carry blankets and bowls, because roles had shifted and now everyone found themselves answering to a different kind of allegiance. Did she trade a crown for a quieter heart, or did she trade a certainty for a life that might yet unravel? Tell us in the comments which you believe. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales of price and promise. Share your thoughts and your own memories of a choice that changed the shape of a person. Some victories leave rooms empty, and some losses teach the art of keeping. In the end, she learned that love can ask for disappearance and also ask for presence. Some costs are paid in silence, and some are answered with a hand on the shoulder. Which would you choose?